morning, everybody. We are delighted to be here. I am flanked by two people who are not on the original agenda. So we don't have Purva and Janavi, but I think we'll have a great panel. I just wanted to share something with you this morning. I have a connection to Goa. My daughter now lives in Goa. I'm a life member of the center. But apart from that, I was listening to the Bhasha discussion yesterday which involved you and Gulzar Sahab and others. And today morning I went for a walk early in the morning. The first language I heard spoken was Nepali. Two people were bantering with each other across the road, a girl and a man. So I spoke to them in Nepali. Then I walked down to the Citadel de Goa and I looked at them and I said, are you from Assam? They said, yes. And we find they're from the area which is most conflicted, the Bodoland area. But both of them are from different tribes, but they're working together. Now, so this is the part of discovery. We are discovering ourselves as we were, as we live. And this, I think, is very strongly related to the theme that you have today. And in that moving away, we are discovering not just ourselves, but each other. One of the things I was sharing with my fellow panelists, that if you look across the Northeast is a mix, medley, whatever, of people, communities, groups, states. We have approximately 42 million people, not a great number in 8 states. We speak many languages. We have 220 ethnic groups. Our borders are 96% with the rest, with other countries. Only 4% is with India. So the sense of distance is physical as much as it is political. Now, increasingly over the years, and this is how I want to talk for a few minutes, and then I'm going to ask my fellow panelists to share their thoughts and read. For the last 40, 50 years, we fight for identity, to build a separate place for ourselves, away from the idea of India. We have been confronting India, but in the last 10 years, the embrace is to India, and we have turned against our own people, our own neighbors. So we are closer to Delhi than at any point in our history, and we are more distant from our neighbors. We have to come to Goa. The guards in my daughter's home are Assamese. We have to come all the way here to find ourselves. And I think that tells us where we are today. In Delhi, there is a place outside the university, Delhi University, where the grocers speak Manipuri, because there are so many people from Manipur who settled there. So the story of India is constantly changing. The story of the Northeast is constantly changing. And language is not the only imperative of identity, but it is, as we saw yesterday, as we all know in our daily lives, it is a fixer of where we are and who we are. So in Assam, you have the Bodo language. But for a long time there was an agitation that the Bodos did not want it to be in the Assamese, dominant Assamese language. So finally they settled on Devanagari. And in the 1990s there was a battle between the pro-Devanagari and the pro-English. So the insurgents were pro-English because they thought it will connect them to the world. The others, the president of the Sahitya Sabha was pro-Devanagari because he wanted it to. The president of the Sahitya Sabha was assassinated. So language can be extremely, as we know, divisive, can be at times very brutal. In the 60s, 62 I think, there was a terrible language riot in Assam between the Assamese and the Bengalis. Resistance to the idea of Assamese being the state language, and led to many riots. Many people were killed. And that's when Bhupen Hazarika sang what I think should be Assam's anthem, Manu Hai Manohar Bhar. If man does not think for man, who will, comrade? If you help somebody walk across a stream, will that diminish you? If a demon becomes a human being, who will it shame more, comrade? So, ours is not a rosy land. It is a land of deep conflict, acute misunderstanding, and deep, deep difficulties and complexities. The people you see sitting here are writing novelists, are rooted in our experience. I am not a novelist. I write non-fiction, I write articles, essays, I make films, stuff. So, but I think you'll find that their knowledge of their world, where they're rooted, is what speaks and is read very extensively, certainly in Assam. There is a point which I wanted to make, and then I'll hand it over to our panel. We're waiting for one more to come. When you travel to the borders of Assam with Bangladesh and with West Bengal, the language changes. Mitra is going to get into this at some point, but people often think when people from the borders come to the heart of Assam that these are Bangladeshis, because the language is different. It's a kind of Khatia, which is spoken also in Bangladesh, but that doesn't mean that they're Bangladeshis. And if I was to sum up, the core of the Assamese identity, it is now being seen as an anti-something. So the anti, the other that you identify with xenophobic bitterness is the Bangladeshi. This other who's going to come in, take your land, take your property, take everything over. And in Bangladesh, I'll just come back from that, they're not even interested in the issue. So there's a huge disconnect which we need to explore, and through conversation, dialogue, writing, and dissemination, bridge these gaps. So I hope we'll be able to get into some of this today. We have a limited time, and I'm going to ask first Aruba Baido. Baido is elder sister, to share from her experience and her writing.
Good morning, and particularly I want to welcome the students, because I'm a college teacher, and whenever I can see the bright young faces, I feel at home. So today, I'm going to share with you the anguish, the tragedy and woes of my land. My land, Assam, it is devastatingly beautiful, but it is full of violence. So our topic is that many faces of dilemma in Assam. Yes, we are under many dilemmas. So the geographical factor, it is completely different from mainland India. So our border, 99% border is exposed to the foreign lands. Only 1% is linked with the mainland India, which is called Siliguri corridor, or that second leg. Of course, I don't like the word. It is Siliguri corridor. And the demographic pattern is also completely different. And there are diverse ethnic groups with different dialects. On the whole, it's a mini India. But the present state of affairs in this beautiful mini India is simply sordid and very disturbing. First of all, I want to tell you the main dilemma of my state is the ethnic conflict. So, in the name of identity, people they began to fight within themselves. So, it is true, homogeneity cannot be forced upon them. Uniqueness must be cared for, and there is need for sharing. But in spite of all these things, there is fighting among people. Ravas, they fight the Garus, Borus, they fight the non-Borus, Khasis, they fight with the Garus, the Manipuris with the Nagas. So ethnic conflict is the burning problem of my state. And while we want to analyze the ethnic conflict in my state, I think I have to go to the colonial past. So once the British rulers, they admitted in the British Parliament that we have ruled Assam in the worst possible ways. That is their conviction. So in the name of unity, because they are imperialist, and Britishers, they are imperialist, and all the imperialists, they have two faces. One is benevolent and other is exploitative. So I must confess that the British legacy gave us many things. So we learned many new things from the British people. Of course, British people, they started a renaissance in my state. But at the same time, we can't forget that they are imperialists. So what is the character of the imperialists? So once in America, the imperialist people, they went to the native land and they gave to the native people some rugs, warm rugs as gifts. But those rags were infected with the germs of smallpox. And those simple native people, they used the rugs, and hundreds of people, they died out of smallpox. So this is the face of imperialists. And the British came to Assam in order to earn profits. And in the name of unity, in the name of peaceful rule, they divided the people. There was frontier within frontier. They instituted many laws in order to divide people. Frontier within frontier, the secluded areas, there are so many rules. And the main aim of these rules were only to divide people. And the same legacy, it continues. So once, the Cookland, he wanted to secede northeast Assam from the India. They had planned a crown colony. That is their original motive, to secede the whole northeast area from Assam. And they wanted to establish a crown colony. So the secession regime was started by the British. And I think this accursed colonial legacy is more or less responsible for our present ethnic conflict. And there is another very burning problem that Chandra has referred to. Okay. Then there are some problem of state terrorism also there. So there are armed sector, and all the armed sector anti-people, and in the state plays a very dubious role. They want the electoral gain, and they want the power, and the dubious role of the state is more or less responsible for our present state. And nowadays the slow economic growth is there. Slow economic growth is there, and the surrender schemes are there, and all these things, it brings disturbance to our area. And we are creative writers. My perception of reality is the creative writers of personality. I am not a sociologist. So I write what I see. So this is my book, Felani, that means the thrown away. Falat, the throw away. And in this book, I have tried to give the portrayal of a group of marginalized women. So they were ensnared in a historical process for which they are not at all responsible, but they have to bear it. So in this book, I have asked the question, yes, there is the 30,000 hours, there is 1,000 hours burned, but what the woman will do? There is no rice, there is no firewood. What she will feed to her children. So this is the message of my book, and in this book I have tried to portray a group of marginalized women, and on the backdrop of this multiple dilemma-ridden state. So I want to read out some portion of my book. So I want to read the last paragraph. So you see, in spite of the conflict, in spite of the dilemma, we are here. We are creating, and people are carrying on their life. So Brecht wrote that, yes, there is darkness. Shall we sing in darkness? Yes. We will sing the songs of darkness. My Felani is also a tragic song of darkness. Still, life goes on, and the marginalized women, they are also carrying on their life. So I want to read the last few lines of the last paragraph of my book. So this group of women, they went to a field to cut reeds, and in order to use these reeds to build their home, and they are busy in the field. So like others see to cut around the clump of reeds first, and then tackle the middle lobe. Then she cut the rest and made bundles. She touched the white pitch. It felt like corn. She was not as quick and adept as the other woman, but she plodded on. Little birds circled overhead making funny sounds. They filled the entire field. Where will these tiny birds go if we all the reeds? She asked anxiously. They all laughed at her. Who can finish cutting this entire sea of reeds? Earlier there were many more birds here. Every year the Munia birds decrease in number. What birds did you say? Munia. Are those little birds called Munia? They are like sparrows. Yes, those are Munias. The villagers used to come here with torches at night. They used to make noise by beating on brass plates. They blew horns as well. The birds were paralyzed with the noise, and they would kill the birds and take them home to cook. Then these 3 clusters of paddy, these were, the entire paddy fields was submerged in water. The water remained for 8 whole days, and after the water subsided, there was nothing but sand. How come it is filled with reeds now? What else then? The seeds came floating in water. They were carried by the wind as well. These seeds have wings, you know. The flowers turn into wings and they carry the seeds so far of places. They don't sink in the water, they float. The moment they hit the soil, the plants germinate. Talking on and on, the woman managed to cut a lot of reeds between them. Because of the clouds in the sky, none of them could tell the time, but their tummies had started to grumble. Had they been in a marketplace, they would at least have had a bun or a rice cake, along with a cup of strong tea by now. Come on, let's go, Mira's mother announced, tying up her bundle of reeds. If we cut any more, we won't be able to carry them. They all tied up their bundles and readied themselves to leave. Suddenly, it started to drizzle. Quickly, they put the bundles on their heads. Their faces could not be seen now. They started walking along the railway track. This time there were no young boys below the bridge. The place was quiet. Like before, they stepped gingerly on the wooden rail track and eventually raced to the rail. The bundles are getting wet now. Felani was worried. The reeds are getting wet, she cried out to Joan's mother. So what? She answered. They will rot, won't they? Spread them out in the sun to dry. What if there is no sun? What nonsense! There cannot be many wet days in winter. If this lot rots, then come back to cut some more. You can finish the ocean of reeds. Can you? The seeds have wings, remember. They come floating in the river. They fly. When they hit bed and salt, they germinate. The women couldn't see each other's faces, which were hidden by the wet reeds. Remembering the work waiting to be done at home, they started walking fast. The reeds had to be dried, the roofs had to be thatched, the walls had to be made and plastered. If the reeds rotted because of the wet water, they would have to come back and cut more. The women hidden under their bundles kept walking towards their home. So in this way, in spite of dilemma, in spite of conflict, like the reeds, we survived. And I hope good days will come to us because nothing can destroy the reeds because the seeds of the reeds have wings, they can float, and whenever they can find the soil, they can germinate.
Thank you, Madam, for that very evocative conversation, sharing. I'm going to ask Mitra Fukan, who was your keynote speaker, one of the keynote speakers at the inaugural. She needs no introduction. She's also a classical singer by training. We've been together since school, so I know her since.
Thank you, Sanjay. It's lovely to be here again talking about our state. We can talk endlessly about the beauties of our state. Don't worry, it won't be endless. I would like to say this multiple dilemmas, how we as citizens who live in that area, which you read about in the papers and all, but what is it like to be actually negotiating our way through decades of this kind of violence, sometimes high intensity, sometimes what is very wrongly called low intensity. There's nothing that is low intensity. A death is a death, a kidnapping is a kidnapping. It is not low intensity, but that's how they define it by the number of heads who are affected. There are several areas of multiple dilemmas. One, as Sanjay has mentioned, is the language. Language, we are a very multilingual, India is a multilingual society, we know that. Assam is a very multilingual society. It is also a multi-dialect society. Assamese changes from district to district, from village to village. Sanjoy's, Orupa's, the places of our birth, the Assamese that is spoken and written, of course the script is the same. But the way it is spoken is very different. Now that, for me, I can only speak for myself, but I think all of us who live there are representative in some way or the other. For me, the dilemma of language, because my mother comes from a border area that he spoke about. Till the time of partition, there was a lot of coming and going between what is now Bangladesh, lot of coming and going, and it was not defined by language at that time. Or if it was, they were looking more towards the areas to the west, not to the east. Now, Dibrugarh is in Upper Assam, and the region I am talking of is right in the west of Assam, Lower Assam, that is Dhubri, Gwalpara, all those regions. They had much less connect with Upper Assam than they did with what is now Bangladesh, what is Bengal, and so on. And obviously the language, it is Assamese, it is recognized by linguists who have studied this scientifically. It is Assamese, but the pronunciation, some words they are very much Bangla, and basically the pronunciation is very Bangla. So, and my mother always had this very Bengali accent, but that was not Bengali, it was, to untrained ears it was Bengali, but it was actually a Gwalparia accent when she spoke. And then she always used to say very sadly that people always ask me, am I a Bengali? And she identified herself as an Assamese, that's what she was. But, and then that has come down to me, because when I say my house, and my cousins and so on who live there, they speak this beautiful tongue, which he has mentioned, and there are beautiful songs from that region in that tongue, and those songs are now vanishing. It is being obliterated by, I would say, the hegemony of the larger Assamese language, which is a very sad thing. And how do we negotiate that? We don't know how to negotiate that. This dialect is dying, and nobody seems to care, because there are not enough people to speak it, and those who are speaking it have come out and they have moved on to areas such as Guwahati and Upper Assam and so on. Another area I would like to talk of is culture. Culture as in music. Music, at one time, the influence of Bengal was very strong in all languages. Now I'm not going into the pros and cons of that, but one of the beauties we must acknowledge that, songs, literature and so on, their beauties are, we have to acknowledge without going into the politics of it. One fallout is that, and it's a personal fallout for me, I love singing Rabindra Sangeet. I am trained Rabindra Sangeet singer, and at one point there was a lot of space in my town, Guwahati, where there were a lot of concerts being arranged for Rabindra Sangeet. Today, after these so on, as Sundar said, we are anti this, anti that, anti that. Unfortunately, we have also become in this way anti-culture. That was, I don't think that was anybody's idea, that when we say we want our language to be strong, it does not mean that we must throw away all that is good in other cultures. To listen to Rabindra Sangeet was an enriching experience for many of us, for many people. But now there are, believe me, very, very few Rabindra Sangeet occasions, except on Tagore's birthday. And those are organized by the Bengalis, to which Assamese do not go. I am almost the only Assamese in the audience, and certainly the only Assamese singer who is singing Bengali. Then they ask me, oh, but you are from that district. No, you are almost a Bengali yourself. I said, okay, if you say so. So that is another area, this is the dilemma. How do we negotiate that? These are everyday dilemmas. Okay. Then we come to this, having lived in a place where extortions, when we were talking about this in the panel, I live in Guwahati, in a place which is possibly one of the most peaceful, you could say, in the entire state. And yet, so many of my neighbors have been kidnapped, their husbands have been kidnapped, somebody's brother has been kidnapped, somebody's brother has been shot, somebody's husband has been taken away and given back for ransom. These are everyday, these are people, and it's not just me, all of us know these people. We are living in the middle of that. How do we negotiate that? Because we are between two forces. The anti-forces and the people who are there to stop the anti-forces, the anti-forces. So, and how do we, ordinary citizens, how do we negotiate our way through that? These are our dilemmas today. Let me tell you something that happened to me. One of my children's young friend, at that time he must have been about 10 or 12. They were playing, my children went out in the evenings to play, and then they came running back, and I will never forget that expression on their faces. They came back with that look of horror on their face, and they said, you know, Jana, Sudi ko kidnap kori loi gol. That means one of their best friends has been kidnapped, and he was a 10 or 12-year-old boy. And that for me, till today, this was a while ago, until today I cannot forget that look on their faces, that their world of innocence has crumbled. That thing in their eyes, it has gone forever. And that for me was a defining moment, you know. If I cannot give my children that security, if I cannot give if we as a society have failed our children in this way, what else is there for us to do? Why are we even, the future is not ours, that means. So then how do you negotiate? And of course the boy was later released. But the thing is, and then, you know, then he shared his stories with my children. And my children would come back and tell me those stories, and oh my God, nobody should have to live through that. He was not tortured or anything, but the fact that he was kept away from his parents, there was no contact, and all of that, these are realities. Okay, we read, these are things that happen in many places, but when you are living through them, it is something. And let me tell you something, that all these people who come, who are kidnapped, okay, they are released. They come back shadows of themselves. And okay, they are alright at that time, but within a few years they are dead. That trauma. And this boy, of course, he's now a grown man, but his mother died. After a few years, his mother died. So, I mean, it takes a toll in so many ways. And recently, another friend of mine was kidnapped. He's a writer. He was kidnapped. And again, we went through this same cycle. You know, I went and visited his wife. She was there. She had a role. The mother had a role. There are roles into which the grieving family, grieving because you don't know whether at that particular moment the man is alive or not, what will happen. He was released, but again, he was a shadow of his self. And I will end this, that we negotiate in so many ways. My family has a business, runs a business, we have a factory. This, you know, extortions, how to negotiate extortions. If you pay up the extortion, often you cannot, it is perceived that you will pay, but it is, often you cannot afford that. Okay, so you negotiate that and you pay whatever is required. But if you do not pay, and why is it that you are labeled anti-Assamese? You are not doing anything for the cause of Assam. You are not paying up money. You don't think of the larger Assam. On the other hand, you have to pay your workers. You have to pay to survive. I mean, you have to have some money to survive. So these are multiple real dilemmas that all of us face. I am just voicing a few of them. And hopefully, through these negotiations, through these ways in which we are trying to go about it, and writing is just one of them, all of us are doing many other things to which we can bring some sense of peace, some sense of control over our lives to the society in which we live. Hopefully, the way forward is also to interact in this way with the rest of the nation. And you will, of course, share these stories, all of us are saying, with others. And in that lies our hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitra. I think we have about 5 minutes or so. A few minutes, yeah? There are just a few things I'd like to share, and if possible, maybe I can welcome a comment or a question, maybe just one. But one is, Mitra talked about trauma and tragedy, extortion. You know, one of the insurgent groups in Nagaland is called the Mama Party. The Mama Party, it's called that because the leaders are called uncles. The two leaders of the NSC and IM who extort the most, they call uncle, you know, Uncle Muiga, Uncle Su. But in truth, they are the maximum tax collectors. And people pay at source. No, among the tribes of the Northeast, there's income tax exemption. But in places like Nagaland, Manipur, especially in parts of Assam, people pay 25% of their income to the underground groups. And this has been going on for decades. They call it tax for the natural workers. The second thing I wanted to share with you is that we all have to negotiate and relive these dilemmas every day in our own lives, in our own spaces. For instance, one of the things that my organization does in Assam is run boat clinics. You know, we have 15 boat clinics, reach 1 million people with healthcare on the islands of the Brahmaputra. It's a big river. When there's a ban, the ban does not apply to water. The river is a different entity. So, but you have to get from where you are on land to the river. So there are many challenges that we face in our day-to-day living that comes across sometimes as angst, as anger, as seeking to create a space for dialogue and negotiation, because that is ultimately the way forward. A few random thoughts on what you've heard so far. We have I don't know how many of you know this, but if you decide, any of you want to go to Nagaland, you'll have to get a permit. It's called an Inner Line Permit, ILP. And you need it for Nagaland, you need it for Arunachal Pradesh, and you need it for Mizoram. 3 states of the union. I need it too. I'm from Assam, but I still need it. So this is a major issue there. And in Shillong, which is the major tourist destination, there's an agitation for introducing the restriction there as well. So I think, we are constantly negotiating, trying to understand each other's limits, maybe do a bit more of the othering and maybe a bit less of the we. Because ultimately, the Northeast is umbilically connected to Southeast Asia. It's where the sun first rises in India. Many of our communities have migrated from Southeast Asia. If you go to Shillong, you'll find the signs are in the Roman script, but it's not a language you can understand. It's Khasi, which is Mon Khmer, originally from Cambodia. So we recognize these many layers of life and difference in our daily life. And it's extremely difficult to negotiate with them. Sometimes it's extremely depressing. Yesterday I was talking to one of the Boro student leaders. He says, very, very depressing conditions, very tiring to continue fighting for change and balance and sense, when your friends are getting killed and intimidated. But we have to keep on. I think that's the only thing that we can do, because it's people in the field, not governments, not the guys with arms, it's people with ideas and Zuban will bring the change. I think I'm close there. If you want...
Thank you so much for a sensational session. What I wanted to say is this is a conversation obviously we all want to and we should do that. What I will try to do is we'll create another slot tomorrow if we can, where we will discuss Assam again, because it's such an important state, and the issues that you've raised here are just of immense importance to the future of our country, of the country. Assam is a kind of a mini India. I spent a month there earlier this year. It's got staggering beauty, staggering wealth. It is comprehensively mismanaged by both the current state, your own leaders, and of course it has one of the worst histories of colonial exploitation, possibly the history of the world, I would say, in many ways, which still continues. Nationals own Assam, and multinationals kind of have a vested interest in keeping parts of it in a wreck. At least that was my own finding. But it also has the most beautiful places. This evening you're going to hear from the monks, the buckets of one of the most beautiful ashrams you can ever visit in the world, and they come from a river island. We in Goa, we're on a river island right now. I come from a river island, small river island compared to the marvelous Majuli, which is a place every person should go visit.